Hello, Mr. Welter here. We're going to talk about some of the interview questions from yesterday. We'll go over what the interviewer might really be looking for when they ask you these questions, because some of these I think are a little deceptive. And so this will be geared towards how to answer the maybe the hidden question behind the question, how to give a really strong answer that'll help you stand out. And so what will help you today, so you should have your document that you answered these questions on. You'll want to have that available for editing and for adding stuff to you as we go. That might mean you have to unsubmit it from your assignment from yesterday. That's fine. It's not something that you turned in for a grade, so you're not going to lose points or anything. But you'll want to have that so you can edit that and revise your answers as we go. So you end up walking away from this with some pretty strong answers on here, because you can use this for practice. And if you're doing interview A, you can actually use this during the interview. So this will be a helpful tool that you're going to create today. And also, I'll give you a little bit of time for editing or for writing after we cover each question. And so let's see. Let's start with question number one. Let's start with the first one. So how many times is it okay for someone to be late to school each quarter, or maybe late to work every few months or something like that? So when I looked at the answers that I saw on the rough draft so far, I was actually really happy with those. So usually I get a lot of answers that are just zero. Like, you never want to be late. Being late is horrible, and you want to show the employer that you're never going to be late. And I get that. You don't want to show, you don't want them thinking that you're going to be late, right? You want to show that you're punctual, that you're on time. I don't think that that's the strongest way to answer this question, because here what they're also looking for is not just, are you going to be late, which you are. Like, even if you're never ever late, you're probably going to have something unforeseen happen one day, and it's going to happen. So they want to know that, like, hey, do you know you're human, that you're going to make any mistakes? Because zero is just not really realistic. But not just, are you going to be late? They want to know how you're going to respond if somebody else is late, or if somebody else makes a mistake. And so I think the strong answer here is to say, maybe 2 or 3 times is okay. It's not ideal to be late that often, but things happen. People might underestimate traffic. There might be a family emergency. There might be a sickness or something like that. And so we want to give people a little bit of grace and a little bit of breathing room. And so an answer like that is stronger because it shows you're going to minimize how many times you're late, which is good. But it also shows that you're going to be understanding whenever anybody else has a problem. And I think that is what the interviewer wants to get out of this question. And so a few times, 2 or 3 times, something like that. But the more important part is explaining why and showing some empathy for people who have to be late for whatever reason occasionally, or people who make a mistake. So show the interviewer that you're understanding. So next question, not really a question, tell me about yourself. So this question, I think, can be, it's the first chance you get to really set yourself apart, but it's also, I think, one of the more difficult questions. I'm going to ask this in every job interview that I do for the class. It'll be the first thing I ask every time. So I'll tell you that right now. And part of it is because this question, I think, seems simple, but it can be difficult to put together a really good answer for. When somebody says, tell me about yourself, I think your instinct is to just introduce yourself and say, hi, here's my name, here's how old I am, I went to high school or college here, here's some of the jobs that I've had, things like that. You might talk about, like, if you come from a big family, like I have however many siblings, I have a pet. It's okay to have some biographical info like that. The trick to this question, though, is the interviewer wants to know what you think is important enough to include about yourself when you can only say a few things about yourself. So if you have to describe yourself in only a few words or a few sentences, what is important enough about you? What is descriptive enough about you to choose to explain here? That can be really tough to come up with. And so if you, I think, like, for me, it would be like just saying I'm a teacher is, I think, one of the more descriptive things about me, because you can probably guess a few other things based on that. And so that would be what I would talk about. but I mean, whatever you do, whatever I think you view yourself as, I think that is the real info that the interviewer is going to get out of this question. Is what do you think is important enough to include about yourself to describe you as well as possible when you can only include maybe a couple things. So that one's tougher. I'll give you more feedback on that one as we go. But it'd be a good idea to pause the video and take some time to edit and add your answers for that one before we move on to the next one. But I'm going to assume you paused if you needed to. So next question, also not a question. Describe one of your strengths. So this one is, I think it's a little similar to the last one because the interviewer wants to know what you think is an important strength that you have. Like you might have a lot of strengths. Which one is worth picking and talking about? But the big thing here is that they want to know: are you self-aware? Are you reflective? Like, are you somebody who is reflected on, like, well, what am I good at? What do I need to improve at? And can you walk away from that with like an actually helpful answer, an actually helpful idea of, or a helpful assessment of what your skills are? So one thing that they're looking for here is whether or not you are self-aware, self-reflective. If you have a very good gauge of what you're good at and what you need to work on. That being said, if you can provide a strength that is very closely related to the job, that's really good. So that's a good thing to do too. But I think this is a really good chance to show them that you are reflective and that you are aware of what you need to work on. I think that's even more true with this next question. So describe one of your weaknesses or bad habits. I say weaknesses. You might hear weaknesses. That might be what it is. I kind of want you to think of it as bad habits, though, because I think you get better answers when you interpret the question that way. So just like strengths, the interviewer wants to know, can you look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, these are things I'm good at. These are things I need to work on. And if you can do that, like if you can show the interviewer that you are not only reflective, but very accurate in your self-reflection, then that's really good. That's also hard to show someone, though. So my advice to you is on this question, pick something that you are working on improving. Pick something that you know is a bad habit you get into. So a couple of examples might be procrastination or perfectionism. I think it's a pretty common but still kind of strong answer here. Like perfectionism, you're not saying, well, my weakness is that I'm perfect, but you're saying that like if you're a perfectionist, it might be hard for you to get started with work in the first place because what's the point? It's not going to be perfect. You can find a bad habit like that or a common pattern that you might get into and identify it. But then it's also a chance to say, hey, I'm working on this. Hey, here's what I've been doing to kind of cut back on the procrastinating or cut back on the perfectionism, things like that. So this is a chance to identify a bad habit and show you're reflective by doing that, but also to show that you're working on it. So even if the interviewer doesn't ask, what are you doing to work on that? You should tell them what you're doing to work on that. When people look at the weaknesses question, I think the most common answer that I see, the most common mistake, I guess, that I see is saying either something like I have no weaknesses, or something I think much more realistic, which is choosing a very small and irrelevant weakness, just kind of as a throwaway, because you don't want to like show them that you have a lot of weaknesses, right? You want to seem like a very strong candidate. I think you're going to be better off if you are if you show them that you're reflective and you admit to a possible weakness. That being said, there are some weaknesses that can disqualify you. So have some discretion in what you identify as a weakness. Like you don't want to say, yes, my weakness is like hard drugs. I can't resist them. I probably shouldn't have said that on video. But anyway, don't say that you have a weakness that is like terrible or illegal or something like that, right? Because that can take you out of the running, obviously. But anyway, moving on to the next question. So pause, take time to write if you need to. tell me about one of your achievements that you are proud of. So this question has two things the interviewer's going to get from it. They'll know what your achievements are, and they'll know what you're proud of. And those, I think, very much, those are two kind of separate points of information. Um, it can be kind of difficult. I think a strong answer here can be really any achievement, but as long as you can explain why that is an achievement and why that means something to you, why that's significant, I think that explanation can go a long way for you. So the achievement itself could be an award you won or something like that, but it doesn't even need to necessarily be an official achievement. Like, so the example that I'm going to use for this is debate related, and it's one of the examples that I've used in a job interview. And it worked. It was good. But anyway, you in debate, you go to competitions, you go to tournaments. If you look around the room, you'll see like a ton of trophies. And I was not part of all of them, but I was part of some of them. And you can point to like winning the state championship as a big achievement. In South Dakota debate, if you have a lot of experience with South Dakota debate, the state tournament is not typically something that we put a lot of value in. And that's, I think, kind of a weird thing about debate. I think the state tournament's a big thing for a lot of other activities. An achievement for me was doing more to compete at tournaments out of state or larger tournaments, competing against programs that are like 5 or 10 times the size of our program, things like that. And that's not an officially recognized achievement. So my point is that it doesn't need to be an official achievement. It doesn't need to have a trophy or an award associated with it. I think the more important part is explaining why it's an achievement, explaining why you view that as something that is a step forward or something of value. All right. So let's move on to the last few. So how would your friends describe you? This one can be kind of fun. So I'm going to kind of combine how would your friends and how would your teachers describe you, because I'm looking for similar things with these. How would your friends describe you? Basically, the interviewer again wants to know, are you self-aware? Do you know how you come across to other people? Are you aware of the impression that you make on people? Are you aware of what traits about you stand out? And so this can kind of be a good chance to show that you know how you treat people, you know how you come across to people. And that's very important in any position that might deal directly with anybody in the public. Like it would be important if you're a teacher because you're dealing with students. It might be important if you're even like a cashier or something like that because you're dealing with customers. It's important if you're in any public facing position. So how would your friends describe you is a good chance to show that you know how you come across, that you've thought about how you come across. You put genuine thought into that. How would your teachers describe you is similar, but the key difference is, so this question might not be teachers. It might be how would your past managers describe you, or how would your boss or anything like that, how would your parents describe you? Basically, anybody who is in a position with some authority over you. And the important part about this question is that this is a chance to show that you know how you come across to anybody who has authority over you or anybody who is above you in any job or anything like that. That's the key difference here. This is how are you viewed as a person, like interpersonally? Are you aware of how you're viewed as a person? And then how are you viewed as an employee? How are you viewed as somebody who is responsible for stuff or who has to report to somebody or turn stuff in? Like, are they going to say that you met all the deadlines? Are they going to say that like you may have procrastinated sometimes, but you got everything done and did a pretty good job with it? Things like that. But they want to know kind of more about how would your superiors or how anybody who has authority, how they would describe you. All right, last question. What questions do you have for me? So I'm not asking this as like a teacher of like, what questions do you have about the interview? I want to know that, but that'll be later. This is, I think, a very common way to end a job interview is an interviewer asking, what questions do you have for me? And your gut instinct might be to say, nothing, I'm all good, I know what I'm doing. That's probably not the way to go, because asking your interviewer a question at the end is a really good chance to show that you know enough about the job and you know enough about them to develop a really informed question. It's might show a lot more interest in the job if you're willing to like ask more about it, to find out more about it. One common question here is like, so why should I work here instead of here? Like if you're applying to work at a certain school or a school district, like why would I want to work at Lincoln instead of Roosevelt or something like that? Another common question that you would see here would be any sort of expectations for the position. Like what expectations do they have of you? And a lot of that'll probably be identified based on the job that you're applying for. But you can also ask, like, how would this run differently from, like, so here's what we did at my past job. What expectations would be different, or like what would be changed, what would be similar about that? So this is a chance to have a question that shows that you know about the job you're applying to, you know some technical stuff about it, enough to like ask a question about it, and also that you're interested in the organization or interested in the people there. Another really common one is like, how would you describe the culture here? How would you describe like the I don't know, the workplace environment here, something like that. But questions can show interest and show engagement, so that's usually a good chance to show that. But anyway, those are all ideas and things to include for as we're developing answers to these questions. They do not need to be super long. We'll work with kind of refining them down. But today I just wanted to give you more ideas to include with that. So that should be everything I need from you today for these questions.